Can you spot the difference between your dream job and a toxic workplace before you accept the offer? Nobody asked, but I'm going to be talking about all the different things that you need to know before you accept an offer. Most times, a toxic workplace can be detectable from the interview. If you're asking the right questions, if you're reading between the lines, you should be able to tell if a workplace is going to be toxic. I've had a couple of people tell me how their workplace is really weird and how they're dealing with a lot of anxiety because the place is toxic and they didn't know that it was meant to be like that. And sometimes you just find yourself stuck there. You're unable to come out of that space to actually do something else or find a different job. So let's talk about all the different ways that you can spot during your interview process that a place is actually toxic. Guys, one very fast way that you can actually tell that a place is toxic is by word of mouth, right? If you reach out to a couple of people that have worked in that company before, they should be able to tell you what their experience was like, whether it's previous or current employees. Current employees, you might not really get the exact, way things are from them, but from past employees, there's a very high chance that you would, get information about how the company was for them. Now, this is not to say that every single employee's experience is a reflection of the company's culture, but at the same time, I feel or I believe that if you have a couple different employees saying similar things about the company, then it's probably something that you want to watch out for. So yeah, that's one way to know if a company is toxic. Now, another sign to look out for is when the interviewer is not responsive, or when they are not communicating enough, or you have a meeting scheduled and they just don't show up, or they show up late without an apology or no reason as to why that happened. That is a poor reflection of what a company represents, and that's something that you should pay close attention to and not take for or not overlook, right? I think that a company should be respectful enough of your time to show up when you have a meeting planned or when you have an interview planned, to let you know ahead of time so that you can, change plans for whatever you guys have scheduled before. So if they're not doing this and they're just like ghosting you and not giving you any reason why, and showing up to interviews unprepared and just being shady, then it's definitely something you want to watch out for. Now, I think this one is another interesting one that we find most of the time. This is not the case in all scenarios, but for the most part, it could be part of what you would notice that makes a company toxic. So for example, you see this job description, you're applying as a software developer, you're supposed to do this, you're supposed to have these qualifications, and then you're having a conversation with the interviewer and they are, talking about other things that are not in the job description, and they are kind of insinuating that that's part of what you're going to be doing. Now, I think that this is a hint that you might want to take as to the possibility that you might be doing other things that are not exactly your job description in that company. So whatever you want to interpret this as is really up to you. If you interpret this as being toxic, if you interpret this as maybe you taking a challenge, which I think that if it's really a challenge, then there should be no reason why it's not in the job description, right? I don't think that this is right. I think that if you should be upfront to a potential employee about what they're going to be doing or what their job would potentially entail, right? And you shouldn't be kind of being shady by putting some parts of it on the job description and then, talking about it later during the interview, bringing it up later. That's a bit shady to me. So yeah, I think that's another hint that a company might be toxic. Now, this one is important because I think that it's a sign of bias, which is also a sign of toxicity within a company. So now, if you're getting personal questions, deeply personal questions about your family, about, just personal questions, maybe about plans to grow your family, whether you're pregnant, things like that, I think that is a huge red flag. And if any interviewer is asking you that, they have a pretty weird motive. I think that people can ask these questions maybe when you join a company and you're getting to know your colleagues, and maybe they ask you, hey, ask you questions about your family, which you could have brought up in a sense. Maybe you talked about something related to maybe your kid or your wife, your husband, right? Then it makes time for them to follow up asking you questions. But in the interview stage, if an interviewer is asking you questions about, hey, what's your family size like? Is your grandma living with you? Are you pregnant? Those are not questions that an interviewer is supposed to ask you. That shows, first of all, lack of boundaries, and secondly, there's a possibility that there is some sort of bias within that company, and you sure don't want to be a part of that. So that's one hint for you to be aware of as well. Another thing that a lot of companies do which is quite hilarious, and I think I learned this pretty early, and I was able to kind of know that this is a red flag for companies, is that they are talking about how the company is a family and we're all a family here and things like that. Your company, the people that you work with, are your co-workers, right? They are not family. And the reason that this needs to be something that you keep in mind is that sometimes some companies are toxic and they use this as a tool to manipulate their co-workers, in the sense that if they start telling you that, hey, we are family and things like that, then you find out that you begin to prioritize the work over the family. You begin to work longer hours because they are family. You begin to prioritize work. You begin to maybe miss your kids' recital or miss your kids' sports events at school. You don't go out on dinner dates with your wife because, hey, I'm working and these are my family members, right? Sometimes it's an excuse for employers to make the employees, work longer hours and prioritize work over other things in their life. And to be honest, I think that this is counterproductive, because proper work-life balance means, as much as you're doing your work, you're also prioritizing your family, because at the end of the day, it's helping you psychologically and emotionally as well, right? But if you find yourself in a situation where there is no balance, then it's going to affect you emotionally, and that would in turn affect your work. So I don't really understand why people do this. I feel like most employers that do this are also employers that are biased towards people that have a family, because if you don't have a family, then this should be your life, so you can as well just put all your efforts into this, right? So that's what I think about that. I think it's not the best, because as much as you should be giving your best to wherever you're working at, you should also prioritize your family. You should prioritize work-life balance. You should prioritize your health, mentally, physically, and in all areas as well. So this is something you definitely don't want to take for granted if you see it come through in any way. Now, I think another thing that happens during interviews that I strongly believe is a red flag is if the interviewer is asking you about your previous salary. I don't believe that any offer you're about to make or any offer you're about to receive wherever you're supposed to work from should not have anything. The skills are relevant, but the compensation is not relevant. The interviewer has no business trying to find out what you were earning before. In most cases, when interviewers do this, they're trying to lowball you. They're trying to see where you worked at before and trying to kind of put you in a box. So if you get the salary and it's just maybe, it's 10%, 15%, 20% higher than what you were earning before, then it's still a win for you, right? But that's really not the compensation for that role. So if you're being asked that question, first of all, it's not a good sign. And in most cases, you also have to keep in mind that companies contract out the initial recruiting process to other companies, and some of these companies are the ones that end up doing this, right? So it's not in all cases necessarily a reflection of the actual company that you're applying for. It could just be the recruiting company with that issue. But in general, in any phase of your interview, I don't think that it is right for the interviewer, internal or external, to be asking you, what you've earned before, what your previous salary was, because really it has nothing to do with what you're working at. If you have the relevant skills for the role that you're trying to apply for, then it shouldn't matter what you were earning before. You have the right you have the access to whatever the compensation is for this next role, and that is really what's important, right? So yeah. Another red flag, and I think people should take note of this, is when your interviewer makes bad remarks or comments about previous employees, maybe people that have worked with them before, right? They kind of talk bad about them, say what they were doing, what wasn't right, and all of that. This is not to say that those people didn't do like those things that they did, but ideally they shouldn't be bringing that up in your interview, because first of all, I'm only hearing one part of the story. Yours, I don't know what the situation with the employee was, and generally it's not even a comfortable conversation, like for someone to be telling me something about someone when they are not there to defend themselves. Is ideally, like, normal world situation, it's not the best, not to talk of like in a professional space, in an interview space and all. I think that any employer doing this or any interviewer doing this, it doesn't show the company in a good light, first of all, and it's not a really good hint as to what the company culture is. Even if the person did whatever was wrong, or the person was involved in, you know, all whatever not great stuff that they did, you shouldn't be the one that is kind of bearing the end of the conversation, because you're pretty new, you're not even part of the company yet, you're still in the process, so you don't really need to have all that information about that person, right? Your focus is on the company, what they have to offer and what you have to offer them. Another thing is when there are too many tests, right, in the interview. Like, so you have maybe a test that is going to take you a very long period of time. You know, you have too many stages to get to the end of this interview, and these stages involve you doing some work. I personally don't think that this is a good sign. I think max you should have like maybe 4 to 5 stages. Even the big tech companies, I think they have about, you know, a couple of interviews, 5 to 6 max interviews. I might be wrong, please correct me if I am in the comments, but yeah, you should generally not be having too many tests, right? They're not trying to test that you exist, they're pretty much trying to test your skills, and those should be able to be streamlined to specific tests to test to look out for the skills that they really need, right? You shouldn't have to do so many tests to be able to prove yourself to this company. I hope that's clear. Then the second to the last is kind of in line with what I mentioned before in terms of, you know, being a family, but this one is more along the lines of the company hinting to you that people sometimes work beyond the normal work hours. Like, oh yeah, some people actually work 9 to 5, but it's fine for you to, you know, work till 10 p.m. because there are other people that do that in the company. Girl, if you hear that, please run. Literally take your shoes and run. Now, this is not to say that there are not instances where sometimes you need to work long hours, maybe because you have a deadline. This should not be the norm, right? Like there are times that you can make allowance for that, and there are times that, okay, because we want to get this stuff done as soon as possible, then please let all, and it should be like a form of, it shouldn't even be compulsory, right? If you agree to do it, then it's fine. If not, then it's really up to you, right? So, but if they're already insinuating that that's going to be the norm in your company before you even join, then I don't think that that's a good sign. I think that first of all, you're going to burn out because you're going to spend most of your time there working long hours. And what happens in cases like this is they might not necessarily force you, but other people are doing it, and if you are not, you know, also doing the same thing, then it will be seen as you not meeting up or not being a team player or not, you know, meeting expectations in some way because you're only doing work within your 8 hours. Meanwhile, other people are, you know, probably doing so much more because they're working longer hours, and it could lead to you getting fired, right? So that's something you definitely want to look out for before you join any company, please. The final thing that I want to say is that you want to ask questions. Do not join any company or, you know, sign any offer without asking the right questions. Like, go to Glassdoor, check the information about them. If there's anything you have concerns around on Glassdoor, I think that Glassdoor is a fair representation. It's not always a good representation of the company's culture, because there are people, maybe there was a change in the situation of things in the company. So previous people that were a part of the company when things were bad have put their reviews there that reflect bad on the company. There are cases like that. There are also cases where people typically only make noise about something when things are bad, right? Like if I buy something on Amazon and I don't like the experience, I will be quick to go to that review section and give you a piece of my mind, right? And tell you that, hey, this didn't go well, I didn't like this. That's the same thing that you might be seeing on Glassdoor reviews about some companies. It could be that most people that, you know, had a bad experience, maybe during their interview process, maybe they didn't get the offer and they are pained, they are hurt about it, they come to, you know, write the review on Glassdoor, and that obviously, you know, brings down the rating of the company. But then again, if you read the reviews, I really think you should read the reviews on Glassdoor, and you see specific things, right? Maybe about the company, especially from people that have worked there before. If you see specific things about that company, then it's something that you can ask about during your interviews. You can clarify, let them give you more light as to, you know, what you saw. Of course, there are other platforms right now where you can anonymously you can see people anonymously talk about their companies. So companies like, platforms like Blind and Fishbowl. This is not a sponsored video, just putting that out there. So companies like that are companies that you can actually see information about companies and, you know, what it's like working there. You can ask questions as well. Definitely ask questions during your interviews, read in between the lines, you know, hear what they are not saying, because this interview is not just them interviewing you, you're also interviewing them. You're also trying to see if this should be the next step, right, for you, because you don't want to, trust me, you don't want to waste your time with a company that is not going to be mutually beneficial, right? That you are only the one giving, but you're not really, you know, being prioritized. Your career is not being prioritized. So you need to read in between the lines, and the interview is the best way to do that. Ask questions. You don't have to be aggressive about your questions. I know it's an interview, it's a conversation, right? So just ask questions, ask the right questions. And yeah, I think if you do this, you should be fine. It's not in all cases that you will necessarily spot a toxic company during the interviews, but I think that more often than not, you would know, or you will get kind of like a sign that will tell you, maybe this area is not that perfect. And of course, no one is perfect. No company is perfect, right? Everyone has the things that they're trying to develop, and, you know, the things that they're doing really great at. So that's also something you should keep in mind. But the question is, what's a non-negotiable for you as the potential employee, right? Maybe there's something you've gone through in a previous company that you absolutely don't want to go through again in this next company. So that's definitely what you want to look out for as well during your interview. So cheers to the next offer, cheers to the next company you're going to work at. I hope you're able to detect a toxic workplace from a mile or an interview away. And yeah, I wish you all the best. If you're new here, thank you for watching my video. If you're returning, thank you as well. If you're yet to subscribe, please do. I talk about content related to tech, faith, and lifestyle. Don't forget to drop a comment and like this video as well, so that the algorithm gods can know that you like to see more of my content. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.